Hello and welcome to another Peace Vigil webinar. This is our discussion on the Ghadar movement. Can the diaspora be a force for real change? I'd like to just remind everyone that you can go to our website, peacevigil.net, or to our YouTube channel. You can just look for the Peace Vigil logo, and find us on YouTube, and see other webinars, including the two webinars Dr. Jagmohan Singh has already been part of. The first was on the family history of Shahid Bhagat Singh, and the second was on the life history of Shahid Bhagat Singh. I'd urge our listeners and viewers to go and check those out. They were really great discussions. So this is the third webinar that Dr. Jagmohan Singh will be presenting on. Dr. Jagmohan Singh has been an activist his whole life. Soon after being born, he was the youngest political prisoner in British India when he joined his mother, Bibi Amar Kaur, the younger sister of Shahid Bhagat Singh. His mother was being imprisoned due to her anti-imperialist political activities, and Jagmohan Singh Ji was too young to be separated from his mother, so he had to go to prison as well. In addition to his career as an engineer, Dr. Jagmohan has been part of the Shahid Bhagat Singh Research Committee since its founding in 1981. In that role, he contacted former members of the Ghadar Party, those who were still living. Through those interviews and his own research, Dr. Jagmohan has written a biography of Sardar Ajit Singh, who was Bhagat Singh's uncle and a founding member of the Ghadar movement. That work, undertaken nearly 40 years ago, or in fact more than 40 years ago in some cases, when many members of the Ghadar movement were still alive, makes Dr. Jagmohan Singh today the foremost expert on the subject. Dr. Jagmohan Singh, it's a pleasure to have you back with us today. And let me also turn the mic over to Shireen, who will be facilitating our conversation today. Thank you.
Thanks to Peace Vigil, giving an opportunity to talk about a great movement, which is called Ghadar movement, as a part of the freedom movement. It is a very bold and encouraging period of our freedom struggle. The Ghadar name it draws from the 1857 War of Independence. The British called it Mutiny Ghadar, a crime of rising against their imperial design. But to Indian, it was a revolt to gain freedom to take care of their own affairs. So far, Indian, it was the birthright to rebel, and that is why they adopted the name Ghadar. And most important message for Indian was, it was fought unitedly by all peoples of various religions, castes, and creeds. A great unity was forged. Moreover, there was a large woman participation in it, like the Begum Hazrat Mahal of Lakhavat, Lucknow. She had her full force of women who were a fighting force. Similarly, Rani Jhansi had a similar force of women, and when she left her fort, the in charge of the fort was Jalkari Bai. So that tradition has been a part of the excitement with us. It was a half-won war because 1857, the War of Independence, which is called Ghadar, was against the end of the misrule of East India Company, which was a corporate company exploiting and repressing the people and causing a lot of misery. So that was virtually banned, and a transfer of power was handed over to directly to the England. And at that moment, Queen of Victoria on 1st November 1858 declared that now the direct rule by the British, and she pledged some of the things, and that pledge became the next point of discussion and checking that are the British rule, which is directly from the British Parliament or British Queen, is uh, fulfilling that pledge. Her pledge was that her subjects of whatever creed may be will be admitted to office in our services where they qualified by education, ability, and integrity, earnest desire to help establish industry and promote public works. India is to be administered for the benefit of Indians, and our subjects' prosperity will be our strength, their containment, our security, and in their gratitude, our best reward. And it is interesting that in 1884, one of the viceroy, Lord Ripon, he took it seriously that whatever pledge has been given by the Queen should be translated into the administration of India for the goodness of Indians. So he virtually tried to make some of the efforts, but the English bureaucracy was so much grounded in the scared of mutiny that didn't want him to give such powers where the magistrates and others were to treat the British uh, making an error or a Indian making an error equal. So he virtually has to resign and go back. But his going resign virtually precipitated that the actual nature of the British bureaucracy for rule was suppression and looting, not for the benefit of. So that doubt was immediated. But this is also the period when there are a lot of famines, epidemics, and as well as causing a lot of bad economic conditions, which gave rise to one way was to go make a migration. And this is interesting that the very first Indian civil services, ICS, uh, to be elected in 1871 was Ramesh Chandra Dutt. In 1874, when he was dealing with the administration of the famine conditions in Bengal, he virtually wrote a book called Bengal Peasantry, and where he really found that the problems of the peasantry are, which is keeping them in poverty. And later on, he resigned in 1897 and joined University of College London, where he wrote a thesis, Economic Nationalism. And he brought a solution that the misery of peasantry is because they are not having allied services. So Savdeshi was introduced. Savdeshi means that we should uh, produce our own needs and fulfill it instead of importing. And this was became the word for the next freedom struggle in the in the beginning of 20th century in 1906. Similarly, there is another very interesting person, Dadabhai Naroji. He went to England in in connection with the business allies, but he later on found that the business or even your interests are not safeguarded until you have a voice in the House of Commons. From a liberal seat, he was elected to the House of Commons, and while being member of the House of Commons, he constantly raised, and there are a lot of documents which he wrote, and he called it un-British-like rule and making of poverty. So the poverty in India was being diagnosed as because of misrule. And in 1906, as an old man, he suggested that the only solution is to have your own rule called Swaraj. Swa means well, home rule, they virtually called it. So he brought it. So this is also that the people do went for their individual, but they had a broader national interest or people's interest in their mind. So whatever earning they made, they also deployed it back to the goodness of their this, own people from India. And so we find that there are three types of migrations which are taking place, or four of that can be taken. One is that students were going out for studies. So there were India houses which were set up. One was set up in Japan, another was in New York, and one was in London. So this London India House became a discussion point on what is British rule and what it is giving and what it is not giving. Similarly, there were farming class, the agriculturists, who under duress, because there are a lot of famines and the type of policies which are being followed is bringing them into poverty. So under duress, they also moved. They had two routes. One was that British used them as their soldiers to further progress their imperial designs. And that was also because they didn't have a good economic founding there. So they were pushed into army. But at the same time, some of them migrated on their own. The, and the third category was those patriots who were conscious they were fighting within India, but were fear of prosecution or were virtually being hunted out of India, and then they were still continued their working while out of India. So these were exiled patriots who came. And fourth is some of the entrepreneurial people like Dadabhai Naroji, who was entrepreneurial people. So these are the migrations which were taking place. And one very interesting is that in India House in London was established by Shyamji Krishna Verma, a very man of a very common family, didn't have much money, and they say he had only maybe 10 pounds when he arrived in London. But later on, because of his intelligence, because of his hard work, he earned a lot of money. But that money was not for his personal gain, but in encouraging the students to study and propagate the cause of the Indian freedom struggle. And Bhikaiji Kama, this lady, was also from a merchant family, but she was serving in Bombay to the plague epidemic and got herself sick. So, for her health purposes, she was sent to England for treatment. And there she worked with Shyamaji Krishna Verma and Dadabhai Naroji and became one of the strong architect of Indian freedom movement. And its most interesting part is that on 22nd August 1907, Kamaji attended the Second Socialist Congress at Stuttgart, Germany, and raised the first time the Indian flag. And she said, please rise up and salute. The new Indian nation is born, and this is the flag. And it interestingly, in that audience, uh, Lenin was also there, and he raised and saluted. So that was the type of people who were working for it. And this India House became and after some time, the British wanted to close it down. So they moved to Paris for further work. And then we reach this one is 1907, the Pagdi Sambhal Jatta movement. And this means take care of your honor, because Pagdi or the headgear is the honor of the farmers, which is uh, always taken care. And this movement out of a song which was sung by uh, Lala Banke Dayal, uh, uh, with this name, Pagdi Sambhalo Jatta, Pagdi Sambhalo. So this became a movement, and this became virtually, uh, and this movement had a very strong basis that there were three laws which were passed against the farmers, for which Sajid Singh and Lala Lajpat Rai was exiled to Mandalay. But there was so much of pressure on the British government, and the chief of the army staff virtually records that he has personally gone into to find out the mental status of our Punjabi soldiers. And he said that I warn you, Mr. Viceroy, if you don't withdraw these rules, we will face much worse condition than 1857. So those three rules were withdrawn, and this is the only time British withdrew those rules. And Lala Lajpat Rai and Ajit Singh were uh, brought back from the exile. They were made free. But later on, there was a lot of conspiracy going on to plug them. And Sufi Amba Prasad, one of his close associates, they had a lot of publications. So they left in 1909 India on their way to Iran. They virtually were Shiraz. Sufi Amba Prasad stayed there because he was a very good Persian scholar. And he wanted to organize people there, which we'll talk about it later. Sajid Singh then moved on to the Europe and landed in finally in Latin America. Another very important is that Yugantar Ashram is the name of the headquarter of the Ghadar party in San Francisco. So this is the original photograph of that. This is at 5 Wood Lane in San Francisco. So it has been demolished and rebuilt. But the Yugantar name itself represents another mass movement which was waking up in Bengal, and it was also continuing. And this Sajid Singh was in touch with these Bengal revolutions also. And this was Yugantar means new age, a movement by those who had exposure to the British studies. And the most interesting is Aurobindo Ghosh. Well, he was also qualified for ICS but refused to join ICS. But he writes in his autobiography that one poem by P.B. Shelley, which is called Revolt of Islam, made me think that I must do something for my country. And interestingly, Aurobindo Ghosh, as a young boy, was sent away from Bengal, and his father was a doctor. 3 of their brothers were there in England, and he said to the tutor that don't teach your things to them, make them a free-minded people, but at the same time, they should not meet any other Indian because if Bengalis are there, they are already mentally suppressed. So a young boy is made by learning, and this is very interesting that he writes it that I read this poem 16 times, and he started a paper called Jugantar, and a first revolutionary movement in Bengal was started by Jatin Das. And in the meantime, there is another revolutionary, Jatin Bagha, because he was directly the person who was organizing for the Ghadar movement at the later stage in Bengal. And he had a full planning. And the CID man who virtually worked on him, he said, Jatin Bagha is such a meticulous planner that he would have been the commander-in-chief of the forces in Europe. So that is the type of person. And interestingly, Sister Navedita, who was an Irish lady who came, got impressed by Swami Vivekananda's speeches, came and joined Swami Vivekananda. He first time recognized Jatendra Mukherjee as a helping cholera sufferers. And she introduced him to Vivekananda. And Sister Navedita is one person who has virtually made up the new mind of the Bengalis, because she introduced a lot of concepts, and she also was as a part of the person who made the Japan India House movement. She was actually to introduce that, and he's called Jatin Bagha.
There's a question. Yes, please. Yes.
He is called Bagha because as a young boy, he barely, by a knife, he killed a lion. So that is why he is called Jatin Bagha. So the type of determined person, but at the same time helping his own citizens suffering from cholera. That is the type of person which is lying within that.
I see. Yes. Dr. Singh, there's a question from the West Coast. Is this Aurobindo the mystic who had an ashram in Pondicherry? Is this the same?
Yes, later, because when he was imprisoned for 3 years and he came back, all his that group, which revolutionary group, was built by his younger brother and others. That was actually dismantled. So then he went into that there is something spiritually to be found, and he built that. So he is the same old revolutionary, which later on became a mistake in that. Thank you.
And Dr. Singh, there's another question, is that in today's condition for people like us who are staying outside India, what should we do? I think Dr. Singh is going to deal with that question towards the end.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that.
All right.
So when Jatin Bhaga was introduced to Vivekanand, he advised, let new India arise. Let her arise out of the peasants' cottages, gasping the plough, out of the huts of the fishermen, the cobbler and the sweeper. They have suffered eternal misery, which has given them unflinching vitality. Living on a handful of grain, they can convulse the world. Give them only half a piece of bread, and the whole world will not be big enough to contain their energy. So he also instructed Jatan that young men with iron muscle and nerves of steel are needed who will plunge into the service of the motherland. So that is the part which is not shared with us, which is from his original writings that I'm quoting. So Jatin Bhaga actually sent number of his emissaries to get training and arrange the arms supplies for it. M.N. Roy, a very renowned person who later on became the first communist to come back via Russia and had a privilege of having a parallel thesis on independence movement. Dr. Taraknath Das, Bhupendranath Dutt, the younger brother of Vivekananda, also went to Europe and America for these preparations. So Jatin Bhaga was actually preparing for the revolt and was waiting for that arms supply will come. They had a contact on that one. So as I said that Nivedita introduced many things because in 1905, a new psychic national movement of insurgency came because there was a Russo-Japanese war in which Russia was defeated. And virtually, the first time they said that Asian nations are capable of defeating the European nation because Russia was taken to be European nation, that Europe is not invincible. So Nivedita opened link with Japan, which later on became a center, which we'll talk about when INA was formed. And similarly, Maulvi Barkatullah from Bhopal, he was a professor, Maulvi Barkatullah, he was there to train the young men over there. So he later on became the vice president of the Free India movement. We'll talk about that. So these migrants, which actually in the first level were ex-soldiers. And it is very interesting because these ex-soldiers were given jobs in security in Singapore, Malay, Hong Kong, Shanghai. This was the first migrations which were taking place. But they were, because of the famines and the epidemics, there was a lot of distress in Punjab. So when this was such a bad economy, they were lured or pushed into military services. That is why Punjab became a garrison state of British rule. But they were being pushed, young people. And then when the Queen Victoria Jubilee in 1897 was celebrated in London, number of Punjabi soldiers were taken there to showcase that Queen Victoria's rule has such a variety of people under her rule. So, but on their way back, they had to touch the Canada and America. They found that there is such a big land that if they can work hard and improve their lot. So many of them left the military service and dreamt of joining in Canada. And that is why, and because Canada was directly under British rule, they felt that we have equal right, because as pledged by Queen Victoria, we have equal right to have the right of settlement in Canada. But in Canada, they have to face a racist discrimination. The protest, they burn their soldier unit, but that was that we have served the British with all kind of our efforts, but we are not being given equal rights. And one of the first demonstrations they did was they gathered their uniforms and medals and burned it openly. And that was the first time that they virtually uh, came to the nationalist feeling, and that loyalist position was left. And this is another, the first test which was made by was two persons who were actually organizing, by Pag Singh and Balwant Singh. Because in 1911, the Canadian immigration rules were made that only those who come directly from India by a direct ship can come here. Otherwise, people will not be allowed to come. So they said that we have the joining of our families is our first right. So that they wanted to test that. They went back to India, and they brought their families to Canada in January 1912. And this was, now lot of people enjoy this family joining rights, and lot of our rights now in these countries. These are how they fought for it. And they were detained in Hong Kong for 3 months, and then they were detained in, and these are the two families, by Pag Singh, his wife, and his daughter. And the wife actually died while she was giving birth to the son. And this daughter and Pag Singh, Pag Singh was taking care of her. He was also organizing, because he was that Gurdwara was organizing, and he was got killed by the British agent Hopkinson through another Indian. And this girl was later adopted by the society. Similarly, by Balwant Singh, he brought his two daughters and wife, and after their detention, they virtually succeeded in landing. And this was the first boy who was born in Canada out of these immigrants. So that means that family rights they were fighting. Uh, so these are actually the names of their wives. And uh, so this was on 28th August that the first boy was born in Canada. His name Hardyal Singh. So
Dr. Singh, if any of our viewers are interested in the personal stories of these first immigrants from India, are there books or personal documents that are available that they can look into? Because many of our viewers are interested in the personal histories of people as well.
Definitely, there is a lot of literature. So I was trying, because this is a particular example of how people suffered and they sacrificed them. Bhai Bhagwan Singh was later, because he was, Bhai Balwant Singh was the first person who went back to India after bringing his family to make arrangement for the, and he went to England also, so that he could plead for the rights of the people and talk, but they found that they are not responding. So that is how this whole frustration of their, and they're getting educated that what type of rights they are, because similarly there were Chinese migrants, there were Japanese migrants, but whenever they were being discriminated, their governments will come to their favor. But here the government of India was virtually taking that they should not come here, because they will get exposed to new ideas and go back. So that is there. So there is a lot of literature on it, which we can share later. Those who want to know it, definitely there.
Thank you.
So now Canada virtually became the center for the fight of immigration rights, because of its the pledge of the Queen to Indians. So they have to organize themselves against the racial discrimination, because they were being attacked as laborers also by the white supremacists over there. Some of them has to run away from Canada to America, because Washington and Oregon are just adjoining states with British Columbia. So they migrated to that, and these stories start going there also. In the meantime, the Indian workers were also organizing. Then themselves in America. Because even in America, though I had a lot of liberties or freedoms, but there also the racial discrimination or racial attacks were taking place on them. So they were starting organizing. So Washington and Oregon states are the first centers where in America, right? And Lala Hardyal and some students in San Francisco, they were organizing it and they were trying to help it out. So that is why the headquarters was stationed in San Francisco. So now the Ghazar's own mouthpiece first was Jugantar, and late and there was, because every person who was there, he became a poet, and virtually there is a lot of folk song or the poetry created by these persons, the Gadris, and that was called Gadar di Gunj. That is a Kalorian call from the Gadar. So, they were political awakening was which was coming up over there out of the real situation, and then these people like Lala Hardyal, they were uh, catalyst to put it into a structural way. So these people are called semi-illiterate and literate. But it is very interesting that Gadar party also started uh, teaching those who are illiterate to make them so that they can themselves read and write at least Gurmukhi. So so there was a good propaganda which was shared, and because these poems written by them were directly which was shared by them, so this Gadar or Yugantra was published in Punjabi called Gurmukhi, Urdu, and Gujarati also, because there were people from Gujarat who there. And the first Pacific Coast of Hindustani Association was formed in 1912 and 13. This is called Pacific Coast Hindustani Association. Baba Son Singh Bhakna was the president, Lala Hardyal was the general secretary, and Pandit Kanshi Ram was the cashier. And one of the interesting thing is Pandit Kanshi Ram was acting as a contractor in Portland. And we always have the Portland and Seamert are they synonymous. Is a Portland Seamert, which is called. He made a lot of money, but he gave all that money to the party. And that is what he became cashier, and later on got martyrdom in when he went back to India. He was hanged. At the same time, another center was building up. Maulvi Barkatullah, who was a professor, he was in New York first. He established that New York center, then went to Japan. He was professor there. And later on, they went to German, and they also met Lenin, because Lenin's memories are there. So the Maulvi Barkatullah and Raja Mohinder Pratap. He was a philanthropist from Aligarh. Actually, he contributed some of his property to Aligarh Muslim University. His own Haveli or big palace was converted into a girls' school, and he came to the Federation, and they established the first Azad Hind government in Afghanistan in 1915. So this is another interesting. Now, another turning point is that to test the immigration rights, Baba Gurdit Singh, this was called Kamagata Maru. He made a Guru Nanak company, which actually engaged a Japanese ship called Kamagata Maru. And because he said, I was moved by, because most of Indians were held up in Hong Kong. They were just being tortured there. They were not getting anything. So he said that I wanted that why not we have our own ship and take them directly there, so that that continuous journey thing could be there. And this was the young boy with, this is Baba Guru Singh. And incidentally, 24th July was his death anniversary, which we are celebrating. And this is one of the scene of that. And one of the very interesting thing about Kamagata Maru is there were 369 passengers, there were a lot of Punjabis, Sikhs, there were Hindus and Muslims also. And this, they remained together for 6 months because they were not allowed to land at Canada airport. They were held up in the sea. So, and there is very interesting thing is that if you go to Vancouver Museum, you will find they have preserved a brick over there. And when I went there, the curator was saying that this brick tells us a story, because this was the brick, which is a Japanese brick from that ship, which was thrown at the police, which was trying to charge them. So we say that these artifacts actually make a story, and we tell the students that sometime a piece of architect or artifact tells a story. So they were there, and actually for them there was a shore committee, and this Hussain Rahim, who was also from Gujarat, but was one of the first socialists over there. He had a good group of so-called non-Asian or white friends. Mr. Bird was there, who was actually advocate. So that group was helping them. They were fighting against the racial discrimination. And Son Lal Pathak was his colleague. So they were actually arranging, and there was a lot of tussle going on. They were not allowed to even appeal over there, and they were made to return back. So that return back journey.
Before we proceed, I'd like to just remind our viewers that these people who arrived in Canada are very different from the people who are still arriving at this time, you know, the time frame that we are talking about. The people who were arriving, say, in Africa, or in your other parts in the islands, you know, of the world. They're very different because those were the indentured laborers. So these people actually paid for their passage. They've actually got a ship that they paid for, and they are coming. Is that correct, Dr. Singh? So they are very different in terms of the class. Even
so this is exactly, this is a voluntary act. They were actually a kind of slavery yet. They were virtually put together, and they have only right of labor over there. But here they were facing that in America and Canada, there was no rights of land. They could not buy land. They had to arrange some of their friends who were white, that they will take the land and they will do the rest of the thing.
So this is very important, because I think many people regard the Indian diaspora as like one big whole, and you know, it doesn't work like that. So for instance, the Indians who came to South Africa are very different in terms of their backgrounds and where they came from. Even the people who are coming to Canada at this time that Dr. Singh is mentioning are people who are not rich. You know, they don't have the opportunities in India. There is famine, there are other problems, but it's not the same class as the indentured laborers coming to South Africa. And if you'd like to know more about the other group of people, the indentured laborers coming from India to colonies like South Africa, well, it wasn't really a colony, but you know, it was occupied by the European powers, then you can refer to another of our webinar called Gandhi in South Africa, where there is a detailed discussion on indentured laborers. And one of our viewers here has mentioned that there's a great documentary about the journey of the Komagata Maru, called Continuous Journey. She has given a link, so anybody who would like to watch that can watch that. Also, Dr. Singh, there's a question: were these people returning to India, or they were staying abroad? Well, I think the person means that were they going to stay? Was that their intention, or were they going to go back?
No, basically, they were single. So that is why that right of family was being also tested. So they came here to change their fate, but at the same time with honor, because they wanted honor. And this Komagata Maru was returned from Vancouver, but it was not allowed to. They were not allowed to land on the way. they were all taken to the Calcutta. There is a one port called Baj. And when they reached Calcutta, instead of giving them a free right to be in India, they were received by shooting. And there were 20 persons who were killed, and all of the others were directly put into the railway bogies and brought to Punjab. And they were virtually imprisoned in Punjab or in their villages. So this movement actually became a call for all those who were in Asia, also the Southeast Asia, or who were in America and other way, that now is the time that we must revolt or organize an armed rebellion against this with the help of the army. And this is a very interesting cartoon of that time, that even Americans at the time, there were a lot of liberty, but they were trying to send they called Hindus. Basically, all Indians were called Hindu at that time. So he says that to catch hold of to the Britisher in India, and the Britisher in India is smoking. He says, no, no, not me. He says, they are impossible thing. We don't want it over here. So this is and there was a couplet that we are being pushed in the home as well as in the foreign countries, that we have, and that was the fight for their identity and this which is there. So this is few of the couplets from what type of thinking they were virtually fired with. So they say that we don't need pandits and qazis, for we don't want our ship to be sunk. The time for prayer and recitation is gone. The hour for raising the sword has arrived. You have indulged excessively in sectarian conflict and neglect the interest of the nation. In your simplicity, you have ignorantly raised disputes. And another couplet was, freedom is not obtained by begging. By appeals, political power is not won. Do not petition like cowards. Take the sword and they will run. And this is another very interesting couplet from that. Between Ved and Quran, your discord have ruined the nation, and you are so unwise as not to understand this. Your temples and mosques are crumbling down. Where is the power of your religion or creed? At, at what are you so puffed up or proud about? Even knives and daggers have been snatched away from you. You have sworn to abstain from beef and bacon, but the white in your midst consume both freely. Hindus and Muslims refrain from these quarrels, become aware of your land and nation. So these type of poems were there. Another person, because she's also from Irish background, Agnes Mendeley, and she was actually running the center in New York and was helping the Ghadar movement to build up. And she set up a society called Friends of Freedom for India. And this is one of the pad. And she is the lady, somebody remarked that she is the grandmother of revolutions, because she went with the Chattopadhyaya to German. There she had a lot of problems because she wanted to do some creative work, and then went to China and help in Chinese revolution. But at the Ghadar party's movement, she is always there whenever the Ghadar peoples are requiring help. So that way, we must know some of those unknown people. So there was a lot of papers which were being published. So this is a list of papers which were published at different times. So the very early one was in 1906 by Ramnath Puri. He was working as an interpreter for Sikhs, started an Urdu circular Azadi in 1907 for political education of Indians. Tarknath Das published a Free Hindustan from Seattle, advocating armed rebellion against British rule. And incidentally, Dr. Tarknath Das, he wrote a letter to Tolstoy telling that your sensitivity about this war and peace is about 150 years of inter-European war, and only 5 lakh people died. And you have created such a good awareness about for the peace against that. But in my country, in 10 years, 1 crore 90 lakh, that is 190 millions people have died of famine. Sometimes you should write. And hats off to uh, Tolstoy, because in 1910 he dies, but he studied, well, Indian philosophy, Christian Nanak, and wrote a letter which is known as a letter to a Hindu, because from Free Hindustan, and it was published at that time. And he said, "You must know that your weakness lies in the that you are always waiting for somebody, some avatar to appear and liberate you, and you are always thinking that this world is a mirage, a maya hai." So I said that until you liberate yourself out of these uh, problems, you are destined for this type of situation. So this is an interesting part. Dr. Khan Khoje, he came to US in 1907, and he established India Independence League in New York. Dr. Khan Khoje was from Tilk School there. Similarly, Muhammad Barkatullah, and Samuel Lucas Joshi, they formed a society in New York in 1907. In Vancouver, G.D. Kumar published, and later on what we talk about, the Gadar movement publication in 1907. So that was another type of attempts. But two young students are virtually the landmark of the Gadar movement, because Kartar Singh Sraba was just 18 years. At that time, he learned, because he went to New York and learned the flying of aeroplane, because that was the first time used in the First World War, and it was opened, that Wright brothers patent was declassified by the American government, and this school was there. And he said, "I'm learning the new technology so that I could serve my struggle for freedom much better." And he was joined by Vishnu Ganesh Pingle. They are both from the Berkeley University students. Uh, and interestingly, they were the two together to be hanged in Lahore in 1950. This is Dr. Tarkanath's Dr. Tarkanath's, because which I talked earlier also. Then Swami Vivekananda's younger brother, Bhupendranath Dutt, he wrote a biography of Vivekananda also. He wrote one book, The Dialects of Land Economics of India, which was, he presented it to Lennon, and Lennon said, "Where is the data?" So he later on corrected that or added to that one. And Bhagat Singh says that the highest thinking which is being represented in India is by Bhupendranath Dutt. He was in German. He did his PhD there and was in charge of the German uh, uh, that is there. So the first word start, the Canada, because this was little early, they were preparing it, but they have to start with that. And the very important point is that the movement and its impact can be seen, that 8,000 people, they actually left what they came with the dream, but went back to see that the labor with honor can only be had if we have a free India. And 8,000 people returned back to India to liberate it. And there were a number of places in which that Gadar movement sections were taking place. Like in Punjab, Ras Bihari Bose and Sachindranath Sanyal were coordinator. In Bengal, Jatin Baga was coordinator. In Meerut, Vishnu Ganesh Pingle was in Banaras, Kartar Singh Sraba was organizer. And in Northwest Frontier, because this is how they worked with the army units and prepared them, because they said that in 1857, until the Indian armies come forward, this battle cannot be won. But there were spies inducted by the Britishers which actually exposed it. And one of the beautiful character of the spirit of Gadri is Bibi Gulab Kaur, because her husband actually first put his name that he will go back to India, because it was a voluntary movement. It was, nobody was being forced, but it was a voluntary. People were volunteering for coming to India and fight. Whereas it was written that you will get the award as a death sentence, and Azadi is the final award which you get. But her husband later on changed his mind and she divorced him. She said that you are not keeping your commitment to the India, so I am going with them. She traveled with the Gadris. She was always keeping their morale of returning Gadris high by reciting poems from the Gadar, and it is recorded in the judgment that she was the most powerful lady which kept people moving over there. So another interesting part is that when that Lahore conspiracy case, I'm just leaving the militaries, but when the Lahore conspiracy case was going on, Sraba was the youngest person. And judge thought that this young man can be tricked by his question. He said, you 8,000 revolutionaries, this is recorded in the judgment, came to India for making a revolution. And you had a tricolor flag. What these colors represent, signify? Sraba replied, these represent three values which guide the progress of society: equality, liberty, and fraternity. So this definition of three colors, which was given by Kartar Singh Sraba, is now enshrined in the preamble of but they wanted to black or just wash it out. They got it said by one of their government who was a uh, government presented that one person. He said, no, it is colors of religions which represent. So that means the Sraba's definition has not reached us. It is only an agent of the Britisher who got it confused with that has been talked around. So another is that there was outside India, there was a number of places where this final revolt was done. As I talked, the Sufi Amba Prasad stayed in Shiraz and he actually organized the first so-called national army out of the surrendered British soldiers, and he himself led. And interestingly, he has only one hand. His hand, from birth, he was not having the, and with one hand and pistol, he was leading it, and they virtually reached with the help of those tribes, and they virtually arrested the consulate of the British and reached up to Karman, which is in Balochistan. So this was one movement which was taking place, and Sufi Amba Prasad was virtually, he was to be put to the firing squad on 22nd January 1917, but the day when his cell was opened, he was already had died. So that is the type. There was another young man with him who was Sondhi. He came directly from San Francisco. Similarly, in Afghanistan, there was another, there was Basant Singh Chonda. He was martyred there. But it is interesting that it's Sistan. There was a lot of trouble which Brigadier Dyer, who later on became the more is known for American massacre of Jallianwala Bagh. So he directly had a confrontation with these Gadris, but their guerrilla warfare continued until 1919. And they reached the Godar because they actually had a project of holding one port so that they can freely uh, bring arms or other things over there. Similarly, in Burma, Sonlal Pathak and Harnam Singh Karisari, they were in charge, and Hussain Rahim was also working in Burma. So these are the different scenarios in which it's working. But one of the most important part is that in Singapore, on 15th February, the first that 5 light infantry Indian army people revolted. They virtually had controlled the whole of Singapore city. They killed about 40 British officers and few residents. And later on, 47 of them were publicly executed. And they were all from Muslims from Haryana. 64 mutineers were transported for life and so on. And this is the picture of they're all publicly they were killed over there. The most interesting thing is that on 15th February 1942, the Singapore again fell to the Japanese, and the INA was established in Singapore. This was called Shonan. Actually, its name, local name is Shonan. Singapore is later on. So this is so now something about what type of principle they were following.
So, Dr. Singh, sorry to interrupt, but there are a couple of things, if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate. Go ahead, write. There's no limit to questions. No worries at all. Please go ahead. The second thing, Dr. Singh, is that, I just want to mention to people, you just referred to INA. And I want people to know that we have a very special program on INA, which is the Indian National Army that was led by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So we have a very special program about INA and about Subhash Chandra Bose on 15th August, which is a special day for India. We have that webinar on the same time as today with Dr. Singh, where he will be exploring the history of INA, and you will see the link between what he's talking about today and what happened later. So this is basically a link that is leading you towards INA, towards understanding Subhash Chandra Bose's role in the Indian national movement. So don't miss it. You can already register for it through the Peace Vigil Facebook page or through the website. Dr. Singh, we do have a question about all the things that you have said, happening in different countries. When there was coordination, obviously you've mentioned here, that they were given directives of or they were planned. So was that happening from San Francisco? Was San Francisco still the headquarters, or was the leadership spread out? How was that happening?
No, San Francisco remained the headquarters. And actually, then they changed it that there will be a commission of 3 people who will be organizing. So within America, they were coordinating. But I was just saying that these things are not known, that it is not only India they were doing it. There was such a big theater in which and all directions they were working. So I am trying to just mention that. So, but otherwise in America, this continued even after that, because one of our first book, that British Terror in India, was published by Ghadar Party in 1920 on Jallianwala Bagh. And one of the complete story of martial law is available in that book. So that continued.
Yeah,
that
and
there
the leaders were spread out, and they probably did not even want to know where they were and where the planning was taking place, because that would have been very dangerous for the people involved.
Another important thing which you are talking about is that the project which was that in the World War, it is the time to liberate, because war gives you a chance, because they are involved in their own theater, so you can do it. And that project, which was not succeeded in First World War, was started in Second World War by INA. It is a continuity of that very Ghadar Party project, which is, and that's interesting, that then they had a full army to fight. Here they are trying to bring cooperation from the army units, and they're doing it. But one of this, that the place where they had such a massacre in Singapore, became the death knell to the British. In Second World War, the first big surrender took place in Singapore. And on 15th of February, the day they were martyred. So that continuity is to be seen. We will explore it little more, that how people really help, because that is when they say that a martyr's blood never dries, is that. That is very important. So once you make an effort, it continues growing. But most important is to know what type of principles they were following. So very first thing is they said that because we are fighting against a system called imperialism, so wherever a Gadri is, he must help the forces which are fighting for their people's rights. So that means your sincerity with everybody's cause, wherever you are, is as important as, because you are working for the for the freedom of the humanity, and it is against imperialism. The concept of imperialism was introduced by the Gadar party, and their model, as explained by Kartar Singh Sraba, was bringing equality, liberty, and fraternity. And that is why Bhagat Singh says that Gadar party is only such organized party which has a very important alternative project after throwing the British out. What will be the type of society be there? The second is they made it a principle that religion is a personal matter and should be kept away from public discussions. And another very important achievement of the Gadar party is the caste and creed was not there. All were equal. And that is why you will find that most of the Gadaris, our identity is their village. When we call Son Singh Bhakna, he is from Bhakna village. If we call Baba Kesar Singh Thatgad, so he is from Thatgad. Jwala Singh Thathiya, so they were known by their village and not by caste or creed. So, and even one which we call in Buddhist terms Dalit, he had a equal opportunity of sitting, and so a kind of uh, society which was they were actually working was there. And another very important principle they said is the education is the most revolutionary act. And one of the story I would like to share, because along with Bhai Balwant Singh, uh, Banta Singh Sangwal was another Gadri who were in the early party. They were there to see and make preparation in India. And the very first act he do was establish a girls' school in his village, establish a hospital for the animals, and have a panchayat system. And even he reversed the high court judgment because he say the truth is within the uh, collective wisdom of the village. So these are the type of principles they were virtually working for. And another important is that they had a revolutionary passion which they maintained all their life. So Singapore is, as I told you, is known as Shonan and became the headquarter we will talk about in the next. So there are my personal encounter with some of the Gadri Babas, because in 63, the 50th anniversary was being celebrated in Jalandhar. I just walked in because I had, let me see, meet those. So many of the Gadris Babas were there. And Baba Pakna was actually speaking. And his words changed my life. And along with me, my teacher, Professor Malvinderji Singh, who has contributed quite a bit in history. And he says that he tried to bring on record their biographies, autobiographies. So Baba Bakna was saying that the Chief Minister of Punjab, Pratap Singh Karon, wanted to trick us. That he said that, Babaji, why you are sitting in this hut here in the village? I have a good bungalow for you in Shimla. So he said that you are a very clever man. You studied on our scholarship, because Gadar party was also bringing young people with their scholarship. He said, but you know that to kill me it's easier if you just take me away from my people, I will be dying. So, but he said last words were that we are very strong-willed person until the youth comes and take their heritage from us, we are not going to die. And these were the words which moved me. And I was just joined engineering college. I had my teacher, Professor Mulundarjit Singh, and I tell that Babaji is calling. So we traveled, found on cycle, we reached there, he's close to Amritsar. And Babaji, then what we learned, he said he was living in a hut. And he saw how it happened. He said that my village, Haveli, was given to the girls' school. And I said that you can sell some part of it, make a good school for the girl, because that is important. Then in his own land, one third of the land was sold to establish a Desh Bhagat Yadgar, a memorial which these people built for their own on the same pattern as they had in Yugantra Ashram. And one third, 7 acre, he gave to a high school to be established there. and and a very interesting part was that when I visited, he had three animals: a dog, a cat, and a cock. He said, this is the society we can build because they don't fight with each other. We said, how it could happen? Because dog and cat cannot live together and cat and cock cannot live together. He said, this is because if everybody gets as per his need, they don't have any quarrel with each other. So the second part, he said that if you have to serve the people, forget about your ego. Don't go for your ego or leadership. Go and serve. That will satisfy you. So these are the type of person. The second person we met is Hari Singh Usman. This is a very, he was in the Gadar. He has been writing in the Gadar Ki Goonj. He was in the San Francisco. He was on a special duty to take a ship of arms to India, but he has to leave that because 5 of them were there. So he just escaped into Indonesia. And there he got some god which was Usman Khan. So he named himself Usman. He married there. And out of that marriage, he had 2 sons and 1 daughter. And when INS call came, he said to his wife, who was a Indonesian, he said, you now take care of your family. My Gadar party told me that this war is the point when you can liberate. So he said that I am going for my call of the party. You take care of the family. But very interestingly, his 2 sons, Hira Singh and the other one, they said if our father has gone to for his motherland's liberation, so they on their own they came, and one of them got martyred, another died of cholera. So both of them sacrificed it, and in 1949 he returned to India, and he had a very interesting motto over there that if Subhash is Subhash is alive, we are alive. If we are alive, Subhash is alive. He said this controversy that Subhash is, so he was in charge of the propaganda in INA also. So it is a continuity between the Gadar party and the INA, and I had a lot of chance because his village is close to Ludhiana. So these are the other 2 persons which I personally met. Baba Harnam Singh Kala Sangya, because Baba Harnam Singh and Baba Bakna, they were in Lahore jail when Bhagat Singh was hanged. And Baba Kala Sangya was the person who took message from the Gadris to Bhagat Singh and back. And he was such a strong that his whole land was confiscated, which is never returned. But he never, ever felt disheartened. So he was always, now you can see in the film what a type of spirit he was. Another is from Kapurthala, Lala Ram Saran Das. So he has the longest travel. He started as a young man from the Kapurthala state. He started a young man with Sajid Singh in that 1907 movement. Then when the Ghadar Party's movement came, he was in charge of the security of Ras Behari Bose and others. Uh, and he was actually, there were 24 persons along with Kartar Singh Sarabha and Vishnu Ganesh Pingle who were sentenced to be hanged. And he was one of that. Baba Bakna was another out of that. So he was later on, they were converted into life sentence. And while in jail, he wrote a book called Dreamland, that what we Gadaris were dreaming. And when in 1926 he was released from the jail, he came to meet Bhagat Singh and joined with Bhagat Singh. So virtually this is the 3 generations of travel with him. And then, because there was a trick which was played, and he said to Bhagat Singh, you write a introduction to my book of Dreamland, which is a very important Bhagat Singh's introduction, that how to read this document. So that is a fascinating, and even to the last end, they never ever felt that they have to. So that is the revolutionary passion which we see in them. And there are.
I'd like to mention, just for a few seconds about Bhagat Singh. He is a leader of international status. He has a very, very important role to play in history. People remember him with a lot of love and admiration. And Peace Vigil has done detailed work on the life of Bhagat Singh through Dr. Jagmohan Singh, who is Shahid Bhagat Singh's nephew, Shahid Bhagat Singh's sister's son. And we have 2 beautiful webinars with a lot of documentation and rare photographs by Dr. Jagmohan Singh on our YouTube channel, Peace Vigil YouTube channel. And you are very welcome to go and see. There's nothing required. You don't need a password or anything. You just go and watch it. One is on the making of Bhagat Singh, and the other one is on what we can learn from Bhagat Singh. And I am noting down your questions. We will be taking questions at the end. If there's something that is urgent or needs a clarification during the presentation, I am asking those questions if any clarification is needed. Thank you, Dr. Singh. We can continue.
Thank you. This is almost, and these are the other 2 persons which I'm always remember. Baba Munsha Singh Dukhi, again a poet, worked in the San Francisco for publishing the Ghadar, and he narrated me a very interesting story. That one time we were busy in packing and preparing for the Ghadar magazine, and Lala Hardyal was also sitting there. And he said that you are wonderful people. Because what I learned after going through a lot of books, that it is important to have a free country for the honor of your labor can only be assured. But you have directly from the field have come to it. But you will be able to sustain it because this is a passion for you and you have understood the importance of this. But I, having spent more of the time on books, have not the power to do and do that. So that is, and there was a lot of stories which I heard from Baba Munsha Singh Dukhi. Another very important character in this is Baba Jwala Singh Thathiya. And interestingly, these are non-agriculturist classes, but nobody knows who are they. Sometimes now we start making those distinctions by what type of profession their families belong to. But Baba Jwala Singh Thathiya was known as a potato king. He was the greatest potato producer, being non-agriculturist, but he was a successful, and he was the first person to introduce the scholarship for bringing the students
to learn in America. That is why at times Bhagat Singh has a kind of passion that I must go to America and study because there's a lot of freedom over there. So Baba Jwala Singh Thatia represents that. So similarly, there is another character, Manguram. So that Manguram represents the non-agriculturist but Dalit, but he had a equal right. But when he came back to Punjab, the society has not changed. So my point is that they not only overcome their religious differences, but also that caste differences, which still are a kind of problem. The other day in Silicon Valley, that issue has come up that we don't leave our baggage in India back, but we carry it with us. And at the same time, wherever you are, the Gadar party gives you that message. Wherever you are, stand with those people who are fighting with the uh, for humanitarian causes for them. So that is where you gain it. So with this, I thanks my presentation, and it will be open for discussion as uh, she will guide us.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. That was a lot of good information that will help us understand the Gadar movement. I would like you to please use the presentation that you have, the information that you gave us, and relate it to the present circumstances in India. There are a lot of questions related to that, but I would like you to give your views, because I think in your views will be the answers to the questions that have been raised. So especially in relation to the anti-CAA protests that many people of Indian origin around the world participated in, I would very much like to hear what your views are.
I think there are two things that the debate which we had during the freedom struggle was between the imperialist designs, which was divisive on religion, caste, and other things, and somehow or other, the forces which are now taking is that one, and particularly the discriminatory character which is building up. And at the same time, I say our Prime Minister spoke one very good truth when he said that 80 crore people, that 800 million people are of such a condition that they can be disposed of for a month by 5 kg of the rice or wheat and 1 kg of dal. That means the misery has been brought to 80, 100 or 800 million people. So that is the condition which is there. And the solution we are looking for is divisiveness. And that is which happened. That now in Corona, there's a lot of, there's rules which they call reform. And I say, unfortunately, don't read it as deform. It is a deform, not reform. It is not मतलब प्रगति नहीं है, ये विरोध है. So that is the problem we are facing here. And when we talk about CA, well, why if you have to give the rights of citizenship, who is keeping it? But at the same time, you bring in another historical Afghanistan has no continuity with India, but you bring in that one. So these discriminatory behavior, like even what we saw that in Delhi riots, the most of the brunt has gone to a minority community. But finally, when you are making it, you make were they burning their own homes? Who were the others who were burning their religious places and that one? So that way, I think it is a matter of serious concern. The values which was built, and that's why Gadar party is least talked about, because the values they gave, which was taken further by the Jallianwala Bagh, that unity which was built at that time, and later on Bhagat Singh movement carried it, and the same model of unity was carried into the INA, which we'll talk about in more detail about that. So that way, well, we are in a much more challenging time in which all those values. Now, another interesting thing is that one of the ideologue of RSS, who is a professor of Delhi University and is also Rajya Sabha member, has introduced on 22nd March a private bill which says that secular and socialism word should be removed from the preamble. So that is, and similarly now in education. Well, you want to reduce education but what they reduced is all those fundamental values on which the society or a young man mind should be built have been removed in the name of cutting. So similarly out of science, they say that you don't need to study the Newton's law of motion, but you will study the rest of the physics. How could it be? So there is a very funny things. Yeah. Similarly, out of environment, that chapters are removed, which makes consciousness about the environment, because that is the problem. Yes. Because we are facing corona, and environment is one of the issue, which is giving these epidemics also. True. So similarly, you just lock down, because what happened is mechanism is that you demonetize. I say that when you demonetize, you virtually cheated the women of India, because they were the security in the home. She was keeping some savings which were used for bad times. So their savings were taken away. Similarly, for 2 months, you have just imprisoned everybody in home and no work. So you have, that is why 80 crore people or 800 million people have been brought to that misery, because their savings have also been taken away. So that is the attack. So instead of helping the farmers, they bring out three such things which will virtually destroy the normal farmer and impose the corporatization of education. So earlier, even in education, they have brought a change that World Bank will be advisor, just giving 15% of the expenditure, but all things will be organized by them, and therefore private education. So destroying education, where I say that these our Gadris, they said that education is a revolution. So they were spending their time, their means to establish, and particularly education of girls. Now we are facing that virtually girls may find more difficult, because if the economic position is bad, then it will be giving rise to that type of problems. So I think that is when we are talking about that past. This is to ensure ourselves that those values are the values on which the society progress, and it will progress. It can not be taken away.
We are trying to protect the ideals that the Ghadar movement stood for, which is equality, which is inclusiveness, and equality meaning not just caste and religion, but also gender, plus inclusiveness. So, various castes and various faiths, and the overriding principle, which is anti-colonial, anti-imperialistic struggle for the masses. Dr. Singh, the question that arises, especially in the diaspora, is that when we look at the Ghadar movement and see how successful it was in promoting the causes in India, but also for immigrant rights in, say, Canada and the US, the question arises, what can the diaspora do today? Because as we know, there are people who are wanting to do this. I mean, they are obviously participating in protests around the world, as we have seen, from Germany, UK to US and Australia and Canada. But what is it in concrete terms that they can do besides joining those protests? So one thing that comes to mind, and I think we can talk about it, is that the Ghadar movement actually applied the press you know, they took out a lot of written stuff. I mean, there was a lot of newspapers and things that were published by the Ghadar movement. Is that something that the diaspora can do, perhaps, to raise awareness around the world on the things that are happening in India?
That is the minimum which should be done, is to share. The second is to, like Vivekanand says, they are open to others' experience also. Let us leave that wisdom is not lying in India with us. When you go out, you interact with the people, and that interaction is joining with them their struggles, and try to understand at least those struggles, because that is the concept of that you are fighting against a system, whatever we may call it, neoliberalism, or if you are fighting with that, you have to, because until you do that, you will not be protected. At the same time, you don't try to be misled that somebody ruling in India will be able to help you out, because we sometimes take it from that to those things. So I think the duty is to be part of those movements, also learning from them. Like, I am always excited about one Indian girl. She came as a migrant, Shama Sawant, in Seattle. And always it excites me that Seattle was the point where our Ghadar party people imagined something. And she is doing that. She is a Shama Sawant, and they say the most dangerous woman for America. That is a headlines paper gave. So that means you establish those values, and at the same time, you are part of the society. And that is where we can really contribute into that. And sharing of that views is important. And even maybe we are different on things, but we share and learn about it. That will be which is important. So we will learn in India. We will learn from your experiences, and you will we will contribute to that one. And particularly at this point, the type of misrule being used against any voice, I think we need that. Until there is a freedom of speech, there is a freedom of privacy, which our 9 judges unanimously gave in the Supreme Court. But they are being violated every day. And if it is being violated here, tomorrow, when most of the countries are throwing back, because even after staying there for many years, you are not recognized as a part of that society. But you have to be part of that. And then if you come back, you have to see that, like Gadri Baba's thought, that the honor is only if we have a good system within India. And one thing which came to my mind yesterday, a girl raised a question with me, that there used to be Jai Siya Ram. Siya was Sita. Where is Sita now? The slogan has, I said that this is a cultural pollution. Now they call Jai Shri Ram. That means the Siya is missing. So that type of things have to be very thoughtfully taken, that our normal village culture, the woman was first and the man was, even in our, those who we worship, Radha or Shyam. So I think that is, these fine things have to be taken care, that it is not just a new culture is being built, it is being destroying the actual a culture which was uniting. There was no struggle on that. So my point is that in the diaspora, we have to be conscious about something, because you live in a much freer environment. At least there is a right to speak, and if you speak it, it will definitely help the things in India also.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. A few things come out of your question, your answer. The first is that just like the Ghadar movement people participated in the various countries they were in, when it came to immigrant rights or rights for workers in general. I think that it's important that Indian diaspora does that. Unfortunately, many people, for instance, they will be talking about anti-CAA stuff, but they don't see any merit in joining the Black Lives Matter movement. They don't come out for that. And I think that is very detrimental because the overall idea behind this is to fight injustice. And I think if you're part of a society where there is injustice and you don't speak out against it, it matters little that, you're very concerned about India, because you're not actually concerned about the societies you are living in. And as we know, in Indian culture, there is very high degree of racism that translates into our, our dealings on a personal level, on a day-to-day basis. So those kind of things have to be fought. Similarly, for workers' rights, for minimum wage, these are the kind of struggles that we need to participate in wherever we are. Secondly, the gender elements that you have mentioned, I think that is also extremely important, especially, we have so many women students and professors all around the world. And I think, going to tackling this situation through that angle, it's very important. There are some brilliant minds out there who could talk about the things that you talked about, this whole killing of certain good aspects of our culture that can definitely be looked into. The question that people are asking is about, what they can do when they're outside of India. Somebody has also asked about what they can do while, they are still in India. And I think you have answered both those questions. So I'm moving on to the next question, is that all of these people recognized a need for liberation from the colonial rule and gave a call for revolution and united under that. Today, if at all, we need a call for independence from not external, but our internal daily life forces of culture, capitalism, and society. The minute you do that, you are recognized as an outcast and outlaw for anti-national activity. How is anyone supposed to do that today?
Well, I think that is where our conviction is tested. By their saying it that you are anti-national, you don't become, because your commitment is to your people. I say that we have to also distinguish between a word called Desh Prem. Desh Bhakti. Bhakti is a different thing, but Prem is a different thing. So Prem is, which is a more bigger motivation. So, well, that is what they want. They will cry, they will make a huge noise so that you don't do your duty. Whereas our duty from these sacrifices which we see, and there are a lot more. I have just touched a few things. I know many things have not been, because we had a time, and there is a, rightly somebody has suggested that our good friend, my good friend, Dr. Radha D'Souza, has a full compilation on Gadar movement. She has published, she is in London. So there are a lot of work done, but this question that what we should do, I say raise your voice. If you don't raise your voice, you are virtually compromising with it. And these people never compromise, with all their lives spent in jails. And that was one question which I asked Babaji. He died in the age of 99. I say 30 years in jail. You still are so strong. He said, because we had a conviction that we will never fail and that our duty calls us. So I think this is to be understood, that we have to do our duty under these circumstances. So directly, we don't go directly with them. And they're so, well, this noise is so much that they are virtually killing the values. So just somebody is making noise would not help us that we don't do our duty to our children. the way they are destroying. And I say that simply, like you understand that creating dependency is the whole motive, that you become dependent on the ruling section, whereas you need to be independent. And these people were that free mind. So they continued their work, and that is what the word actually a French historian have used for Bhagat Singh, that here is a man with revolutionary passion. It is not that you bring change, but you are always working for the values and the change. And finally, we know it is a good seed which will germinate when the time comes. So keeping that seed of goodness, seed of humanism, where humanity is important, and for that we work.
True.
So if you even you have to sow it in your family.
True. I think that's a very important point, Dr. Singh, because one of our viewers is saying that there are sometimes visa restrictions that do not allow people to participate in the struggles that are happening in their own the countries that they're living in. And I totally agree with that. But at the same time, what you said just now makes a lot of sense in that respect. That like at Peace Vigil, we say peace needs all of us. So it means various degrees. It means various positions that we are in. So for instance, if you have a very secure job, you don't have a visa issue, you perhaps have a green card or a citizenship, then go ahead full steam and do what you can. If you can't do that, then, try and make differences in other ways. I also feel that, your dining table at home is a great place for change, because, what we are giving to our kids or our friends or our students, if we are a teacher at a US university or Canada or England or whatever, that will ultimately lead to some change. So I think it's what we can do, because what we can't do, we can't do. There's no point, worrying about that. But I think what we can do, and perhaps a little more if you can afford to do it, if your personal and your social space will allow you to take that extra step and be a little, braver or daring, I don't know what the word is, then just go ahead and do it.
No, my little point is that you rightly said that, but you have to find a way. Restrictions are only to keep you silent. True. Well, I remember that my daughter got her green card after 9 years. I said that 9 years of slavery you have passed through. So they keep you hanging in that way, and particularly for Indians. So I think we have to find ways of getting connected. You may not go and demonstrate with them, but you can always get connected with them, connected True. With those movements. So getting and connecting. Connecting also to understand and how much we understand. Sometimes we are so biased that True. We don't understand what is happening around us.
Also, I think personal changes, for instance, I have seen people who are extremely wealthy. I mean, I'm talking of people who have lived in the United States for like 40 years and, have a great, social standing, still going to Walmart and shopping there. And it baffles me. I'm like, you don't need to. You are supporting a system that pays nothing to the workers. They treat people so badly, and you can afford to buy at better places, but you're still going to Walmart. Now that is your choice then, and nobody can help you there. So I think those kind of differences, at least we can make. Dr. Singh, there are a lot of questions, so I'm going to just, go ahead. Some of the people who are being mentioned here were socialists and academics. There has been a rise of another kind of identity politics in India, where these people are questioned for not raising the caste issue in the Indian society of the time. And because of that, the entire movement is dismissed. You can find such articles on websites like Roundtable India. I would like to hear comrades' opinion on the matter.
No, I think this is which is one part of the question which is being raised. But I think we have to take it that it is not that you just brush up some values and put it that way. because this is one of the issue which has been brought in, and from some of the foreign universities which raise these issues. But the question is that practically our national movement has dealt with it. Even at the time of Bhagat Singh, the movement was that we have to go away with caste, and these values are carried further. So I think we have to liberate ourselves from that structure. Uh, there's a problem that because we could not take it further, but it has to be liberated out of that. And caste is definitely one which keeps us. And it is very interesting that when Bhagat Singh was writing some notes, he said there are world revolution, there is Indian revolution, and there is a marriage. So the marriage institution itself is which controls our whole thinking over there. So these are the social weaknesses which has to be overcome, and many people have overcome. It is not with the thought, because people have been practicing and working over there. So I don't agree with that, but there is always, yes, they find some weakness with your views, and they try to put it. And now, very interestingly, the other day I just have to see the organizer. They say Dr. Varvara Rao, Professor Varvara Rao, they say he's a poet, but he is a mastermind of the those Marxists. So this type of thing is, it means that you are keeping him under such a uh, inhuman condition because he is not suitable to you. So these problem has to be forgotten. There is a real problem. There is a manufactured problem. There is a propaganda problem. So, but real problem is that we do face. But when I go to the villages, I face that this is not there. So these are sometimes issues raised for issues reason, but they definitely have to be addressed. Like most of the time, it has been said that Dr. Ambedkar and Bhagat Singh were opposite, because Ambedkar was at one time uh, uh, giving presentation to Simon Commission, and Bhagat Singh was, so they were opposing. And fortunately, when we found that the last editorial, which was written by Dr. Ambedkar on Bhagat Singh, is a wonderful one. He appreciates that these are three people who have been sacrificed on the altar of the conservatives, on the imperialists. So then you understand, they understand each other. So we have to create that understanding wherever weaknesses is. And Bhagat Singh always said that our struggle is on two sides. One is against our own weaknesses, which are exploited by our own people, also by the others. So that way, well, casteism is definitely, but it has, we have to liberate our minds. Like I say that in my family, I was never ever allowed, because most of my aunties were from the Dalit, and we never distinguished. They will come work with us.
Dr. Singh, you come from a rather illustrious family. I think,
Not,
let's not you know, I mean, you guys have been in the freedom struggle for generations. So, let's not, but I think for the rest of us, the more sort of the common people, I think we can definitely begin with our personal lives, when it comes to our own marriages, our own relations, the marriages of our kids. I think we can make a difference by not falling into the traps of caste and
I will just narrate one of my granddaughter
sure.
was in England. She said, I have two choices. I don't want to surrender to the choice of my parents, because the proposals they bring, they are not, I don't take them as human beings. So she was so blunt. And she said that then if they don't allow me, I will go and not do marriage.
Okay.
But the person I have worked with and have liked it is not acceptable to them, because he is from a Dalit family. So I said, I hats off to you. You take your decision, but at the same time also take the responsibility that you have to make that success. Don't come with later on. So if you are prepared for that, I will support you. So this is the problem when you come out of the society.
Sure. I mean,
in India,
as we are seeing, you know, in the Indian families, sometimes, you know, if somebody wants to marry a black person, it's such a huge deal in the West.
Yeah,
you know, they say, it's okay to marry a white person, but don't marry a black person. Terrible. Dr. Singh, sorry, we because of time constraints, and we would like to wrap this up. You know, wrap it now. Just finish it. But the last question that I'm going to take is about communism. And then I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Sameer to just, you know, give an overview of what happened. So the questions that have come about communism is that, you know, some of the people who have been mentioned here in the Ghadar movement were socialists and academics. The thing is that, you know, there is what kind of communist Ghadars subscribe to? I don't understand the question. I guess what kind of communism? What kind of communism? And did they have direct working correspondence with any communist group? And what was what was the reason that they did not get in touch with Russian socialists? I think they did. I think you mentioned something about that. Yeah. But also, I guess we have to realize that the Russian Revolution was happening just around the same time. So you know, they were perhaps too busy doing their own stuff. But I leave that to you, and then I'll ask Sameer to wrap up. Thank you.
No, I think the first thing is that they had their own unique identity. They called Kirti Group. The later on, like that newspaper Kirti was being published, that is, they belong to the working, and they worked with the farmers and the peasantry as well as the other working classes in India. So they were practical persons who believed in translating those things into life. So it was, Kirti Group was separate, but they had a communist leaning, but it was practically working on the ground. So that was their importance. And that is called, and it was only in 1944 in Deoli camp that elite communist movement and Kirti movement joined together. But they worked in the peasantry and organizing the peasantry and the peasantry struggles. There are a lot of those stories which they had, and and even with Netaji Subhash, when he left the Congress in 1940, he held the largest that is All India the Kisan Sabha, where Baba Pakna was the president. Prior to that, Kesar Singh Thatkar was the president. So that is, I think, that has to be understood, that they understood that how best the knowledge of socialism can be used for building or making the life of the common peasantry and workers better. So I think that is to be taken as it is.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor Jagmohanji. I'm just going to try and summarize some of the points and then to thank our esteemed panelists. So look, I think there's 4 things I'd like to say just by way of conclusion, just to wrap this up. 3 things to look for and 1 thing not to look for, right? The first thing to look for, I think for all of us, the lesson we can take from this is to look for threads, right? We think of a specific moment, we think of a specific movement, we think of a specific 1947, for example, as a moment when something began or something ended. But in fact, there are threads that go back in history and they are all around us. Growing up in the US in the 1980s, I did not know about these threads that we've learned about today, but they existed, they were around. I could have looked for them. But unfortunately, I didn't have that opportunity. But many of you may have that opportunity to look at the threads going back in history to understand what we have been given by those who came before us. The second thing I'll say that we need to look for is solidarity. And one thing that I learned and that really impressed me in this presentation, I would say that no one understands the attitude of a British imperialist man as much as an Irish woman. And they were two Irish women who were very key to this story. Yes? One is Sister Nivedita, who we learned about, and the other was Agnes Smedley. So I think being willing, being open. Now, I think many people would not have been open to receiving that kind of solidarity, because this is prior to sort of women's movements being very mainstream. Also, you know, I think would have been a tendency among our people to lump all white people into the same category, and not to understand that British imperialism actually began with, you know, anti-Irish or Irish colonization, right? So I think the ability of the people in the Ghadar movement to be able to accept the solidarity from these Irish women is something that's quite remarkable. The third thing I'd say is look for the local struggles. The one reason that we can see the successful Ghadar movement in Canada and the US was because they linked very closely with the struggle for immigrants' rights, which was not just an Indian struggle. It was all of the immigrants in those countries were part of that movement, and they were willing to, you know, make those cries for sort of justice when it came to immigration. They were willing to lead with that, even though maybe their main concerns were about what was going on at home. But they said, okay, we'll put that in the document, but that will be point 3 or point 4. Point 1 has to be solidarity with the other immigrants in our own community, right? So that's very impressive as well. So look for the local struggles. The last thing I'll say is do not look for success, but look instead for passion. When I say do not look for success, I say when we look at this movement, was it successful, was it not successful? I think we're asking the wrong questions. Any success was at most partial. But all of those people, many of those people we learned about, some we haven't learned about, they went back to continue the struggle. Some of them went to India, some of them continued to struggle in Canada and the US. Some of them, you know, I've been looking up online as we've been listening. Some of them led student movements in California and so on. I'll talk about one person who wasn't necessarily part of this struggle, but is part of the next, going to be part of the next seminar we do with you, Professor Jagmohan Singh Ji, on August 15th. His name was M.N. Roy, and he was politicized in 1905 by the attempted partition of Bengal. And he became involved with the Indian National Army. He became involved with Subhash Chandra Bose and part of that movement. He somehow also ended up in the US. He married a woman in Stanford in California. He became involved in the founding of the Mexican Communist Party, of all things. He also went to Russia through his ties with the Communist Party. He got into a conflict with Stalin. And ultimately, he went back to India and was imprisoned by British towards the end, almost as independence was happening. Now, I tell this story not just to highlight one of the stories that we're going to be highlighting when we talk about the INA next time, but also to say, look, this is someone who at every step is not being guided by success. He's being guided by passion. He's being guided by the need to actually do something more. So I think that that's a very interesting story to end on. With that, I'll just thank you one more time, Jagmohan Singh Ji.
Yes, and thank you to all our viewers. One thing we would like to say from Peace Vigil is that we will appreciate it very much if you went and subscribe to our channel, which is Peace Vigil. We have 1,200 plus people who regularly watch our programs, and we would love it if you became part of, you know, those people. We are putting out programs every few days. We also have quizzes on things like race, you know, on jazz and peace, you know, all sorts of things that you can think of. So please do help us there so that we can continue this work. Also, you can go on our Facebook page and give us a review. Lastly, I would like to say that please don't feel discouraged. You know, we are all where we are. The fact that you took time out and attended this webinar says a lot about you. You know, you took out these 2+ hours to hear about something that happened years ago, which shows that you have a commitment for justice. You have a commitment for peace, and we salute you for that. So wherever you are, in whatever degrees you can help, please do help. Peace needs all of us, and peace without justice cannot happen. Thank you, Dr. Jagmohan Singh, for an amazing presentation from which all of us on this webinar learned a lot. And I also am sorry that we cannot take any more questions. And, I'm very sorry that if we missed people, I know there's a lot of praise coming in. We are not going to read that, but we thank you. And if there's a burning question you want to ask Dr. Jagmohan Singh, send us an email and we'll be happy to pass it on.
And also the conversation can continue. We will be posting the video on Facebook, on YouTube. So please feel free to continue the conversation there.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Peace Vision. Thank you, Peace Vision, for giving me this chance. And you're right, anybody wants any question or any help, all these books which are referred to, they're available in my library. They can be freely shared. So welcome. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So much, sir. Peace needs all of us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.